been allowed to go ahead despite 15 years since it was originally given the green light to proceed. Some residents say the 87 block subdivision should never have been allowed in the environmentally sensitive Kuranda area and wouldn't be approved against modern planning standards, or at least not in its current form. Yet extensive clearing is happening on the land opposite the Kuranda Recreation Centre on Fallon Road, if you know that area. Stephen Nowakowski is a well-known conservationist. He's also a resident of Kuranda and for a number of years has been president of the local group KUR-Alert. Stephen Nowakowski, good morning and welcome back to ABC Far North.
Yes. Good morning, Charlie. Yes, good morning.
What are you seeing on the site right now there at Fallon Road?
Well, there's a road being pushed in on that site. There's heavy machinery on the site, and it's all indicative of heavy civil earthwork machinery. So what is happening, they're pushing through a road for stage one of a three-part project. This is an old legacy development that was first approved back in 2007. It was approved under the old Mareeba Shire planning scheme. Since that time, unbeknown to us, it has kept going, kept being approved by delegated authority by the CEO of Mareeba Shire Council. So, for example, there was changes made to that development in 2011, 14, 16, 18, 2018, 2020, and 2021. And we track the minutes of the council quite regularly, every month at the minutes, check the minutes. And there's no records at all by the council publicly of any updates to that development from 2014 to today, 2023. So there's really a lack of transparency there. And so this 83 block subdivision was proposed under the old Mareeba planning scheme. We now have a new planning scheme with the new Planning Act, yet this development is still current. And we're curious to know how that can be. And so it seems obvious that the CEO of Mareeba Shire Council has used his delegated authority a number of times, perhaps 3 times, to give time-lapse extensions for this development. So we're not against development per se. We're for good development, and this isn't really good development. It's out of step with the aspirations of the Kuranda community. So, for example, the adjacent subdivisions have lot sizes of 1.25 acres, whereas this subdivision has lots as low as 2,900 square metres, so just over half an acre. So it's a very high density subdivision within some really good rainforest. Back in the day, back in 2007, we were fortunate that the local community did push hard for covenants, and those covenants are in place, and we need to make sure that those covenants are enforced and make sure that they carry through with this current developer.
How do you believe, Stephen, that this development application, if it were being lodged with Mareeba Shire Council today compared with 15 years ago, how would it fare?
It was actually 18 years ago. Well, it wouldn't get approved because the minimum lot sizes under the current planning scheme for this area, for that zone, is 4,000 square metres, which is basically an acre. So today, if that development went through, it would have larger lot sizes, and that would mean that there'd be more vegetation retained as a corridor. So this cassowary is now using that corridor, so we've got evidence of that. There's also the Australian lace-lid frog in a tree that uses the Jumrum Creek. This subdivision goes over Jumrum Creek twice, so 2 pieces of big civil earth moving will have to take place in terms of bridge structures to go over those creeks to facilitate those 83 blocks. We're concerned about the impacts on those creeks, and we do understand when this subdivision was first approved, the first development application, the developer had to seek EPBC approval, and we don't know if that has actually been done. Today. So we're investigating to see if those approvals are in place. So there's a lot of issues there, and it all comes down to the fact transparent development. So, for example, over the last 10 years, there's been no notices on any websites by the council. We believe it is the responsibility of council to publish the council minutes and also the delegated authority decisions by the CEO. So the community is aware of what's happening. So the community knew that there was a subdivision there 18 years ago, but we just assumed that it had lapsed under the new planning scheme, and we were unaware that the CEO had used his delegated authority on a number of times, 3 times perhaps, to issue a time-lapse extension for this development.
It is 13 minutes to 8. You're hearing from Stephen Nowakowski, and if you've just joined the conversation, he's talking about an 83-block subdivision that is set to go ahead if the earthworks that are happening on the site at Fallon Road are any indication at Kuranda. Stephen, you've described it as a legacy development because it was approved by the council 18 years ago. We are going to talk to Mayor of Mareeba Shire, Angela Toppin, but a little later in the program, so I'll be putting some of those questions to her. But I'm assuming that probably one of the points she's going to make is one that you've already alluded to, that is that there is existing development kind of bounding the land on 3 sides and the Kennedy Highway right there as well. Some might say that it's a logical place for expansion of residential housing, which is something that I think we can all agree is desperately needed at the moment.
That's right. Yeah, so, and like we said, we're not against development per se. What we're after is good development, and what we'd like to see is development in tune with the aspirations of the Kuranda community. We know that we live in a very special place. It has very high biodiversity values, and we want to see the planning scheme reflected with that. And this development doesn't show that. We're not against development. Ultimately stopped and reassessed under the current planning scheme, and that way the lot sizes would be larger and there would be more capacity for wildlife to be able to move through that site, and also have bigger buffer zones around the creeks and also around the residential, around the structures, So
do you, Stephen, acknowledge or accept the premise that higher density, smaller lot developments and housing developments are going to be part of the solution if we are to address the housing crisis?
That's right. Yeah, so the housing crisis is an enormous issue, and I think the federal government's immigration plan over the next 2 years is going to have a big impact on all of Australia. I think that there should be a more sustainable long-term vision for an immigration plan for this country. But notwithstanding that, in this local area, what we are after is good planning, and that's the whole idea of this. The state planning code, the 2016 regional plan, which is a long-term vision for the rollout of planning for North Queensland. So, and under that plan, you have the new Mareeba Shire planning scheme that reflects the aspirations of that master plan, and that was for lot sizes to be not less than 1 acre in this high biodiverse area. And there's plenty of land within Mareeba Shire Council that is ripe for development. So we're just saying that we want good planning. That's all, and we can achieve housing, affordable housing, if we have good planning. And by pushing through a subdivision that is nearly 20 years old in an inappropriate area is not good planning.
Stephen Nowakowski, thank you very much for joining us on Brekkie.
No worries. Well, thank you, Charlie. Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Stephen is president of the local group there called KUR-Alert, which, if you haven't noticed, the earthworks taking place there on a big block of land near the Kuranda Recreation Centre. You've probably been wondering, well, what's that all about? It seems that work has finally begun on a housing subdevelopment approved by the Mareeba Shire Council some 18 years ago. Time has marched on. Not everyone was happy about the approval back then, and according to community representative Stephen Nowakowski, they're even less happier about it now. Here's Stephen Nowakowski.
We now have a new planning scheme with the new Planning Act, yet this development is still current. And we're curious to know how that can be. So we're not against development per se, we're for good development. And this isn't really good development. It's out of step with the aspirations of the Kuranda community. So, for example, the adjacent subdivisions have lot sizes of 1.25 acres, whereas this subdivision has lots as low as 2,900 square metres, so just over half an acre. So it's a very high density subdivision within some really good rainforest. Back in the day, back in 2007, we were fortunate that the local community did push hard for covenants, and those covenants are in place, and we need to make sure that those covenants are enforced and make sure that they carry through with this current developer.
How do you believe, Stephen, that this development application, if it were being lodged with Mareeba Shire Council today, how would it fare?
Well, it wouldn't get approved because the minimum lot sizes under the current planning scheme for this area, for that zone, is 4,000 square metres, which is basically an acre. So today, if that development went through, we'd have larger lot sizes, and that would mean that there'd be more vegetation retained as a corridor. So there's cassowaries now using that corridor. So we've got evidence of that. There's also the Australian lace-lid frog and a tree that uses the Jumrum Creek. This subdivision goes over Jumrum Creek twice. So 2 pieces of big civil earth moving will have to take place in terms of bridge structures to go over those creeks to facilitate those 83 blocks. We're concerned about the impacts on those creeks. And we do understand when this subdivision was first approved, the first development application, the developer had to seek EPBC approval, and we don't know if that has actually been done today. So we're investigating to see if those approvals are in place. So there's a lot of issues there, and it all comes down to the fact that this has not been a transparent development. So the community knew that there was a subdivision there 18 years ago, but we just assumed that it had lapsed under the new planning scheme, and we were unaware that the CEO had used his delegated authority on a number of times, 3 times perhaps, to issue a time-lapse extension for this development.
That's Stephen Nowakowski from the group KUR-Alert, lobbying for good planning outcomes for the community. He says the Jumrum estate is not one of those. The 83-lot housing subdivision is set to go ahead, though, after getting the green light from the Mareeba Shire Council back in 2007, well before Angela Toppin ever imagined that she would find herself as the Mayor of the Mareeba Shire. Mayor, thanks very much for being with us on ABC Far North. You've been listening to those concerns that have been put by KUR-Alert and other residents. Good morning.
Good morning, Charlie. I'm a little bit croaky this morning, so I hope you're all right at your end.
Oh well, I still haven't had my first coffee, so let's just wander through this together. But look, I'm just wondering about the concerns that have been expressed that this hasn't been a transparent process. Why did the CEO decide to use his delegated authority rather than bring those changes that were being made back to the full council? Wouldn't that have been an opportunity to revisit the housing subdivision approval against your new planning scheme standards?
Well, just following up on the development of this, excuse me. Sorry, Charlie, I am a bit croaky this morning. As you said, to start with, I certainly wasn't on council at the time. It was long before I even put my hand up for council, and it was a legitimate approval back in 2007, and that approval was to change the zoning to rural residential. And while the planning scheme has been updated since this time, it probably would be approved under the current scheme with conditions. Now, that's speculative because this is a new council. Everything would have to go through due process again. But however, I can say that this property is surrounded by rural residential development on 3 sides and fronts the Kennedy Highway on the 4th. The development fits with the surrounding use of the land. The suggestion that there's been a lack of transparency, I must refute. All planning applications which have been taken under the current planning scheme are available on Council's website. All applications and approvals prior to 2017 are available on request and have been made and provided to interested parties in Kuranda. The developers at the moment have a current approval for operational works for stage 1 of the development, which is only 11 lots. Okay, so it's basically just stage 1. The remaining 2 stages would be required to submit further operational works applications, and any approvals for these stages would include the requirement to undertake significant works, including 2 bridges over Jumrum Creek.
Right, okay. So you've still got an opportunity to scrutinise that against the new planning scheme?
Yes. Well, things would have to be scrutinised before they proceed, okay? But the development was approved under the Commonwealth's Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Act in 1999. This addresses World Heritage properties, national heritage places, and listed threatened species and communities. So it was approved under the Commonwealth Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act back then.
Okay, but you'd have to go back to 1999 to find that.
Well, that was the Act of 1999, but it was approved under that Act by the Council of the day. It's a legitimate approval, and the block is surrounded by rural residential development. And yes, I share the concerns of the Kuranda residents. We're very mindful as a council that we try and balance and have good developments, retaining and respecting the wet tropics. There is an extreme housing shortage, and there's a lack of suitable and available land for more housing in Kuranda. So there's that pressure. There's 2 lots of pressures on council at any time.
Are you worried about the density concerns that Stephen Nowakowski raised, the fact that under the current planning scheme you wouldn't be looking at lots under 4,000 square metres, and yet this one I think is nearly, well, it's less than 3,000 square metres. Is that just the 11 lots that you've referred to in stage 1?
That's just the 11 lots. That's only the 11 lots as far as I know.
Is that too small?
Shall I? I'm not too sure. I mean, when you look around the areas there, I can see why, the EnviroCare people would be concerned, but it seems to me that a lot of these lots will be very respectful of the environment. I mean, let's face it, if we all wanted to really look after our environment and our wet tropics, we'd all be knocking down our houses that we have. And that's the reality. We want the future to protect the environment, but we also know that young families need housing.
And
so, you walk that tightrope, don't you?
It is a balancing act. Mayor of Mareeba, Shire, Angela Toppin, just describing some of the circumstances which have led to the approval of stage 1. Now, from what you're saying, Mayor Toppin, there's still another 72 lots that will still be subject to further approvals before anything can happen.
Operational and works applications have to be undertaken. So we don't foresee that happening very soon. I think stage 1 will probably, with the 11 lots, will probably, for the time being, be where the developer's concentrating his or her efforts. But, as I say, this was approved way before my time. And of course, the developers have the choice of when they want to start developing. We don't have... we can't say you've got to get this done tomorrow. You've got to give them proper time to allow these things to happen. But
well, they've certainly had that nearly 2 decades.
Yes, they have.
Mayor Toppin,
I agree.
Nobody likes to be surprised, though. You've just outlined why the process has been followed, the EPBC approval has been given, why the delegated authority has been utilised. But wouldn't it have been a good idea for someone just to let local residents know that work was starting before the D9s kind of started to roll?
I take your suggestion, but as I say, there probably isn't a requirement to do that because it has been approved a long time ago and the processes were followed then. But I do take on board your suggestion and I thank you for it.
Mayor of Mareeba Shire, Angela Toppin. Let's just finally talk about something that I know you would prefer to be talking about, and that's the positive things that are happening in your shire. Not that I'm saying that the development isn't, but this one is undeniably, I think, going to be welcomed by everybody. The splash park for Mareeba. Now, how close are we?
Very close. We hope to have it open, but everything in place for the start of the school holidays, so that young children and young families can benefit from this wonderful investment. And as I say, it was $1.5 million from the state government, secured by our local member Cynthia Louis MP.